At most, I would say it's probably a couple hundred. They want to just get people that want to fight against this on both sides, and they want to demonize them so that they can be sort of swept up in this war. Again, it's a small number of people, and they have their men, as it were, in every government everywhere.
Whitney Webb just stunned Glenn Beck by saying it's only a few hundred people that rule the entire world. And in this clip, she gets into the propaganda that these globalists use to pit people against each other and the schemes that they're unveiling to try to subvert our liberties and rob us of our sovereignty. So let's get right into it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Does it ever amaze you how small the circle is? There's not a lot of people doing these things. I mean, it is, but not when you look at it globally. Yeah. It's like
I think it amazed me at first, but now it's like, oh yeah, it's those guys. What do
you think the number is? What do you think the number is that's actually knows what they're doing and is doing it?
At most, I would say it's probably a couple hundred.
Isn't that nuts?
Probably smaller than that, but well, especially with the technology they have today, it's never been easier for the few to control the many. And they want to make it so that, the peasants, the serfs can't, fight against their rule anymore. And again, that's why we have to resist this as much as possible. But I unfortunately think that to try and get us to consent, because again, they need our consent, they will throw the kitchen sink at us to try and get us to consent. They could make life very difficult. They could, use acts of terror like they did in something like Operation Gladio to make people so afraid for their lives that they will give up all of their liberties.
They did this is what the communists
feel
did.
Safer.
This is what the communists did to take over. I think it was Hungary. The NATO thing was we'll have peace, but you can't go in unless invited. You can't turn any countries into Russian satellite countries unless invited in. And so they just went in and they did pretty much what's happening now, and built the framework for it to fall in and then cause chaos in the streets. They had tanks parked right on the border.
Many such cases, but there are a few mitigating factors against this globalist oligarchy too that I think are good. Good trajectories, and that is especially the rise of the independent media. There's people like Whitney that's getting major coverage on independent shows. I mean, Glenn Beck wouldn't be the biggest example of dissident media, but people are interviewing her, and her findings on this is coming out. It's a way to mitigate the tyranny as it's trying to form. Now, we need mass education and a mass awakening on things like Palantir and, biometric scanning and AI weapons and mass data collection, database creation, and pre-crime schemes. Things that she reports on. It does take a concerted mass of people to oppose that before it can take hold and become precedent. But she's probably right. It probably is 100 oligarchs or so that really run most of the world's programs, certainly in the financial world. Our elected representatives are there to make the appearance of having the facade of representing us, but the truth is even those people don't represent us. They represent Lockheed Martin and JP Morgan and Pfizer and the oligarchs and WEF policy. That's the truth.
And when the chaos got to a certain level, their people inside the government of Hungary said, we need help. And Russia rolled across, and they were a communist country overnight. I mean, it's not a hard thing to figure out. They do it over and over again.
But I would argue too that this is bigger than just national governments. This is people. Human. Yeah, I don't know what to call them, but oligarchs. Again, it's a small number of people, and they have their men, as it were, in every government everywhere. I'll give you an example that I find particularly interesting. So Samuel Pisar, remembered as a human rights lawyer, maybe remembered better in the last administration because he helped raise Anthony Blinken, who was his stepson. He was also a very close friend of Robert Maxwell. He testified to Congress in the early 70s, and he talked about something called the rise of the trans-ideological corporation. And he said that the Western multinational corporations of, in the West, right, had started making all of these joint ventures with the state-owned communist companies of Russia and of China. And that what was happening is that they were basically creating a global government of economic power that was making the nation state entirely irrelevant. This is in the early 1970s. And a congressman, I forget who it was, asked PSAR, is this a bad thing? And PSAR was like, not necessarily.
Yeah.
And you can see how this is expanded into the IMF and the World Bank. You know, those precedents were only expanded upon in the years to come. And she mentioned Operation Gladio. What that was a Cold War psychological operation between the CIA and NATO to use terrorist tactics and psychological warfare against the governments of Western Europe to try to delegitimize reigning in this empire building strategy, the idea that we are going to antagonize nuclear powers, which also got expanded. It's not like the US isn't doing that with Russia right now, pouring $200 billion into the coffers of, Zelensky. While we're to go about this and say, we're following America first, even though Trump's still supporting him after 9 months of doing that, I think it's time to put the kibosh on the idea that he ever wanted that war to end. He could end that war if he wanted, if not for the pressures of the military-industrial complex and other things. I'm not giving him a pass for that, but that's the real dynamic here. They want empire-building schemes just like they did in the Cold War, and they want complete control of the financial system. That is what explains the rise of BRICS, where there's this idea of a potential competing currency to overtake the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And if that happens, that's going to be more catastrophic for the U.S. than anything regarding and revolving around Trump's tariffs. And I'm a big adversary of the tariffs too, but that's just the truth, and that's a real, risk that we're facing when the U.S. just tries to enter into this economic global stranglehold via world banks and other globalist organizations.
And at the same time, his pal, Robert Maxwell, was making all of these connections to entities like the KGB, to Israeli national security agencies in the UK, also in the US, across the board, and giving them this backdoored software while also trying to tie together a bunch of organized crime families across the world, starting with the Yakuza in Japan to Semyon Mogilevich in in the Soviet Union, and to mob bosses in the United States. I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but it's just truly astounding. And this was this was the 70s, and he just brazenly admitted it to Congress.
Well, Carol Quigley,
he said one of the...
Do you remember in the 60s,
Yes.
Carol Quigley? He did the same thing. They made him a pariah for a few years, but he was like proud of it. No, we're going to end war. We're going to just tie everything together financially. And then, you'll have these police actions, and the world changed exactly the way he said it was going to change. I mean, they're proud of it. They want to tell you. They're proud of what they do.
Yeah, we shouldn't be surprised that the world's oligarchs have much more in common with each other than they do their own populaces. They live in their own world where global domination is the goal, and that's not the goal for regular people. For regular people, they want to make ends meet, build a future for their families, maybe save for retirement, maybe embark into their passion after working a job for several decades. It's not the ambitions of the oligarchs that want to rule us, subvert our rights, steal our money, and build empires. It's just not on the face of the American people to follow those kind of incentives, because they don't exist. They only exist for the ruling class that Whitney and Glenn are talking about here.
Yeah, I think he in particular, Quigley, was talking about this being affected by the so-called roundtable groups like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, of which Keir Starmer is a member, if I'm not mistaken. Again, these think tanks are very powerful. I think actually, as it relates to the CFR, there's a video of Hillary Clinton calling it the mothership when she was Secretary of State.
Wow.
Where the foreign policy directives really come from, something to that effect.
Is it possible to break this without breaking society? Is it possible to break and stop this?
Before she answers, I think those policies that she referred to from Hillary Clinton didn't come from any even globalist organization. They came from the bowels of hell. That was upstream from the globalists and the neocons and Hillary Clinton. So let's hear from Whitney, though. Can it be broken?
So I think it is, but I think also that people have to realize that to untangle these powerful interests from our lives and from our world, uh, they won't go down easily, but they will go down more easily if more of us act and more of us also know and understand that they, in a lot of cases, there are efforts to try and make us resort to violence.
Yes.
That's what they want.
Yeah.
And I think in the last administration, it should have been very obvious to conservatives that there was an effort to goad them towards violence. And I think that will ping pong from left to right. It will go, they want to just get people that want to fight against this on both sides, and they want to demonize them so that they can be sort of swept up in this war.
That's exactly right. They want to pit people against each other so that can be the distraction while they implement their globalist schemes, continue the wars, continue the inflation apparatus, the wealth seizure apparatus at the IRS and the central bank. And that's exactly what is at play here. She's right about the Trump supporters enduring that. I mean, what was January 6th if not a bunch of feds trying to instigate violent riots? What was the Gretchen Whitmer entrapment scheme if not to try to do that? They use these tactics to try to create a grand narrative of insurrection, absurdly so, to try to subvert our liberties, much like they did after 9/11. We got the DHS, we got the Patriot Act, we got an expansion of the surveillance state, 20-year occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq. They want those same things again. Why? Because they're proven to work, and I hate to say that. I think more and more people's eyes are opening up, and she has, I think the solution is a mass education campaign, and that's the redeeming thing to me about the independent media and new news sources that Americans didn't have access to. They just weren't privy to before, the last decade or so. It was CNN and CBS and ABC and Fox News controlling everything, and they still have some stranglehold of power, but just no one's buying their narratives anymore.
On domestic terror. So violence is absolutely not the answer, but what can we do? I think it's important, again, what we have to focus on what we can actually control. Overnight we can't, a person like me can't dismantle the WEF or the CFR or any of these things, but what can I do? What can I actually control, right? And so I can control where how I live my life, how I raise my children, whether I'm dependent on the infrastructure of people that I know are bad, whether that's the power grid or how I use social media or any of these other things. People need to take stock of their life and what they can control. But ultimately, what it comes down to also, and I think one of the most important points I have to convey today, is that they want our consent so badly and they need it for this to work, and that includes digital ID and a lot of.
Why do they need it?
I think it comes down to a user base. So, for example, if there's a CBDC or a stable coin launched by a government somewhere and no one uses it, it fails. If digital ID is a linchpin to all of this stuff and no one uses it, it fails.
Yeah, that's right. They need the propaganda to push these things because we massively outnumber them when it comes to the ruling class, right? So they need buy-in, they need propaganda, and that's why you have to stop these things, these schemes like CBDCs and digital ID and AI weapons and pre-crime schemes that Palantir is trying to launch into at the propaganda level before that takes hold with the populace and becomes an actual legal precedent in the form of legislation or presidential executive order, etc. You have to oppose these things at the start, otherwise they become binding. That's the entire story of the federal government, especially since the progressive era, where we haven't exactly done away with any of those globalist and centralization schemes like the IRS or the central bank or any part of the welfare state or the warfare state, bringing democracy, exporting it overseas for some absurd, empire building objective when it's just detrimental to the American public. I think she's exactly right.
And I think they just don't think that they think they can use, a carrot, in the carrot and stick analogy to lure us in. And then once we are in, out comes the stick. And I think a lot of this, if it's not through, fear, which is, the go-to way to control people, whether it's the COVID type of fear or, the domestic terror type of fear, that's one way, but also money. Our money is a key way to try and attacking people's wealth and wealth transfers. Because people that are more likely to go into these digital prisons, they will be desperate. And so you want desperate people also don't think rationally.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, you worry about your survival, and you stop worrying about, maybe your civil liberties or maybe even the
Sure.
Constitution. And that is what
Hierarchy
they
of
want.
needs. Yeah.
And so I think how do we protect ourselves and insulate ourselves and our communities from events that are leading us towards that reaction and the problem reaction solution paradigm?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's so right that fear is the biggest impediment to thinking rationally. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is what the government propagandists and their corporate collaborators exploit to rob us of our rights. They've done it so many times. You only have to look at, say, just the COVID regime or just 9/11, two things that happened in the last few decades, to see how that's true and how quickly people are willing to give away their liberty for the illusion of some temporary security. Ben Franklin said if you give up your liberty for security, you deserve neither and will have neither, essentially. I'm paraphrasing that, but that is the truth. I mean, that's played out over and over and over when actually to be secure, you have to have your liberty. Otherwise, your rights will be so easily perverted by governments that are their supposed consent that they have to you for nefarious ends that serve them and not you. Don't serve us. It's the uniparty serving themselves. It's kind of the liberal establishment, the conservative establishment that is embarking in the same plans. And there's such striking continuity, regardless of administration. For those people that thought like Trump versus Harris was a grand clash of ideologies, I'm not sure what to say. We'd still have the funding for Israel. We'd still have the funding for Ukraine. You thought we wouldn't have that under Trump? Well, we do. We'd still have the absurd spending, adding $5 trillion to the debt via the big abominable bill. Trump himself whipped Republicans to expend the Biden continuing resolution, dragging Massey in the process for having the gall to say, no, actually stand up for your principles and cut spending. Nope, he's persona non grata, and Lindsey Graham is the guy we're going to endorse. That's the same thing regardless of administration. The little switches and adjustments in federal policy are just that. At the top, and when it comes to the biggest control mechanisms, the financial system's the same. The central bank is still inflating our currency. The IRS is still seizing our wealth. It's still being redistributed via the welfare state. And a huge portion of the welfare state, by the way, is going to military bomb makers, whose markets wouldn't exist in an era that we're not constantly embarking on stupid empire building schemes and entangling alliances like we are in Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan and with Saudi Arabia and all over the world. It's just so backward and retarded, frankly. Sorry for the French, but that's true. But I'm with Whitney. It does seem like a small group of oligarchs basically run everything. The illusion of representative government is only that. And, many of these people are beholden to the same interests while being placed in the position where they have to feign that they're actually trying to support their constituents. There's exceptions to that. I think Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene are certainly that, and other reps are on certain issues. You guys know me. I'm kind of a single issue coalition kind of guy. But that's the truth. But I do want to hear what you had to say about what Whitney said. Is it only a few hundred people that rule everything? How do we break free from these globalist schemes? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Glenn Beck. Glad that Glenn had this interview. Definitely don't agree with him on everything, but him interviewing Whitney Webb shows a lot of promise in where we can go with the independent media. And if you like this video, please consider supporting the channel by clicking the join button below. You can become a channel member, support me. I'll appreciate that greatly. So in return for that, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public. The members only videos you'll be able to watch right now. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.